Necrobutcher. Napalm Death is, it gets called a political band.
Salvation of what I see in others.
When you go camping, you get to see the Milky Way galaxy.
Punk rock type attitude too. We're just going to try to, gross you out with our music.
Yo, what's up? This is John from Noise Dosage Media, bringing you some of the most innovative and unique extreme metal musicians on air to have an in-depth conversation about things you probably didn't know until now. Before we unravel this episode, we want to bring attention to our driving force of visual creativity. Begrudgingly Benny creates one-of-a-kind creatures that you can't find anywhere else but below. His focus is on old-school style, slimy stippling that is budget-friendly for all bands or tattoo desires. Stay updated on the sludge by following at begrudgingly_Benny on Instagram. Wither Designs raises the dead with pen and ink and gives them new life with acidic color. Withered is eager to accompany your next album, merchandise, or zine with new, kick-ass, necromantic artwork. Keep up with the Horde by following him at withered_designs on Instagram. Thanks for tuning in, and let's dive into this. All right. Well, what's up, Matt? How you doing? You've been doing some recording today, correct?
Yeah, I've been in the studio all day with Depigus, who is an awesome, very filthy, disgusting death metal band from Santa Cruz and Monterey here in California. And it's their second time here in the studio with us, and it's a lot of fun. Good dudes, great tunes. Despite playing horribly gross music, they're really lovely guys. So it's been fun.
I knew I freaking said it wrong. Like,
oh yeah,
I brought them up in the beginning. I'm like, did I say it wrong, or did I just torture it?
Until I met them, I was saying it wrong. I was like, what the fuck is your guys' name? Like, what is it?
Yeah. I found them in, what the hell zine was it? Frozen Screams.
Oh, cool.
I was reading about that band literally on my lunch break, and I was like, what is this band about? Because, like, it was crazy. Like, their imagery is just so weird.
Yeah.
But it just, like, kind of works in a way where it's, like, original.
It's totally refreshing, I mean, it's like there's a lot of touchstones, I hear Autopsy and Impetigo and stuff, but it's not your typical sort of old school death metal band, historically or nowadays, so it's pretty refreshing, and they write weird music about weird subjects, and it's great.
Right. It's like it's called Parallax Occlusion or something like that. It's another weird band I found where they talk about like 3D modeling. Like, that's another band where I'm just like that's all they talk about. That's their concept. I'm like,
wow.
Bro, like, that is like above and beyond and like really sick.
I mean, hey, find something that you're interested in and make it your own, man.
Yeah. So I'll send that band after this conversation. But my first question to you is really, you guys have been kicking it since like 1990s, the Exhumed crew, and I'm just curious, like, what are some things that you haven't achieved yet that you plan on like doing in the future? Like, what's something you've really been trying to push for?
It's kind of weird because in a lot of ways, I guess a lot of stuff has changed since those days, but in other ways, you don't really notice it as much, I guess, while you're doing it. So if I turn around and sort of think, oh, we did this and we did that and we achieved this and that, that's there's a lot there to sort of get stoked about. But at the same time, I guess I kind of always had this idea, of like being one of the like top tier death metal bands, which who knows if it'll ever happen at this point.
Hey,
if it hasn't
you are,
yet,
man.
But
You're already, you're up there, man. Come on.
And I think it's just sort of, I guess the one thing that I guess I would like to achieve, before our time doing this is done, is I guess it would be cool to make one of those records where people sort of look at it in context and be like, no, that was like the record.
That was the album
that crystallized that moment or that point in time, or, and there's a lot of factors that go into it that have nothing to do with the music. So it's, and it's tougher than ever to make one of those records. But that's always the goal every time, and we're still having fun, and I think that's really the main goal has always been to enjoy ourselves playing the kind of music that we like and believe in, and that hasn't changed, and we're still achieving that goal with every record. So as long as that's the primary goal, and it would be nice to make one of those universally respected and lauded records, but who knows?
Right. And off of that topic of the hit album, I've been told that is a main goal of writing a hit song. No, I've been told this, and like my question to you is, after writing such a killer album, like for me, like Bloodbath, freaking what the hell, Nightmares Made of Flesh, like, bro, I thought like they would just pack it up and leave because that album was just perfect. Like, do you think that I don't know, like making such a great album, do you think that you would continue going on, or would you just stick with the gold?
I mean, it's always really subjective, I've watched interviews or read interviews with some of my favorite bands, and they're just like, I don't know, man, when we went in to make like Number of the Beast, it was just like, well, we got to do something better than Killers, and like that was it. And then we didn't really think about it, and we made the record, and then we went on tour, and we made another record a year and a half later because that's what we do, and so on and so forth. And it's really and a lot of bands think that the record that everybody loves maybe isn't as great as everybody else thinks it is sometimes. Right. It's all very subjective, and you can't pack it in after the big one, because I mean that's when you're going to go out and make more money. So
yeah, exactly.
Don't quit then.
It's like we worked all the way up to here and just pack it up.
Right.
Because it's weird because some bands do the hit singles and then just drop off. Right. Like they'll just be like, can't do it no more. Like that's it.
I think also it kind of depends. I mean, a lot of bands kind of achieve success or notoriety, especially back in the day when they were really young and when they were in really unfavorable business conditions. Mm-hmm. Napalm and Carcass and Bolt Thrower and Entombed and Morbid, they were making all these classic records for Earache, and with horrible record deals and all these kinds of things. So they may not really get to reap some of the rewards. And also, one of the benefits of playing in bands into my 40s now, but it's been going on for a long time, just basically since like my early 20s, is that you tend to have kind of more mature perspective, and the people around you do as well. So you're not like caring about the stuff that you cared about when you were 16, like, oh, so and so said he wrote that riff, but I wrote that riff. Oh, yeah, you know what I mean?
I was just talking to a friend. He's like, man, my band, talking exactly what you did. I'm like, bro, I don't miss that at all. Right. Like I was in a band for like 2 years. I'm like, that's good enough for me. Like,
it's just it's an ego thing, and it's especially when you're young and hungry and trying to prove yourself, and everybody's in that exact same boat. It's really easy to fall into that trap where, and especially if you get successful, it's easy to sort of turn on each other rather than uniting or recognizing that, hey, there's a structure here and this is how that structure works, kind of thing. And
right.
It's a lot easier to have that conversation when everybody, isn't that young and inexperienced and had sort of been around the block and doesn't have that crazy, raging testosterone that you have when you're like 19. I mean, we used to like get in fist fights at practice and stuff. Like it was stupid. I remember one time, like I threw a fire extinguisher at our old drummer's head and like pushed him downstairs. Man. And that's not a brag. That's like oh man, like I'm so glad that none of us are in that headspace anymore. It's exhausting.
That's crazy. All right. So off of exhausting, or for me, amazing. I noticed that you're a fan of Ruin, and I just wanted to mention that because holy crap, man, that band has been just doing so good. And I just wanted to ask kind of how'd you come across Ruin? And, what are some things that kind of drag you into that band? For me, it's getting scared the shit out of in the first 20 seconds.
Well, I've known Mike Abominator, Mike Nelson, since like the mid '90s when he was doing Gasp, which is a great sort of. They started as kind of like a power violence band, and now you couldn't really even categorize them.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I've known Mike for a really long time, and I jammed with him in Gravehill for a little while. About 10 years ago, and a lot of the guys in Ruin have sort of also passed through Gravehill, so I know all those dudes, and anything that Mike does I'm always interested in hearing, and I like everything that he does, but this one I think was just firing on all cylinders somehow, and it's just the whole band, it's really like the grossest kind of death metal that you can hear.
God, like,
and I mean, I listen to it sometimes, and I'm like, oh yeah, Exhumed like pretty extreme, and I was like, man, we sound like fucking Dokken compared to this shit. I love Dokken, so that's okay.
And then you listen to Dokken, and then you're like, what the fuck is this?
I listen to Dokken pretty regularly, but to me, like Ruin is it's stripped away all of the sort of sophistication of death metal and really just taking it down to the real ooze, the primordial gross stuff. And I don't know where Mike keeps finding these samples, because I kind of thought they'd all been used already, and he's able to just find stuff where I was like, that's actually like kind of chilling, dude. Like, what the fuck? I thought samples were corny.
The scariest one is like the kid being like, the mom, I think it was the mom or some counselor, and she's like, Ben, why did you hurt the girl? And why do you come out at night? She's like, and the kid's like, because they're sleeping. I'm like, bro,
that's
like,
so horrible, dude.
I'm like, it's like this little freaking 10-year-old kid. But
yeah, I mean, Mike just has a knack for sort of finding that stuff that I think really, goes into the real dark side of human nature that a lot of death metal bands, including my own, don't really go to. They keep it a little bit more slick and a little bit more fantastical, or some of the more medical stuff has like a clinical detachment. And Ruin just goes right into the sort of
just straightforward.
The serial killer, like the real ugly side of humanity, and their music sounds like it. It's a total package that works.
So the last thing I want to say about him, so I've talked to Mike before, and I asked him one question. I said, can I just ask you what tuning you play? And he goes, I have no idea. I'm like, that is the most badass answer I've ever been told. Like, it just doesn't stick to any like key, not key, but just structure. He's like, fuck it, dude, I'm gonna just go in.
This is what sounds heavy to me today.
Cool.
And I think it's the thing is, it's not like Mike doesn't know how to use a tuner or any of that stuff. I mean, he's certainly not Yngwie Malmsteen, but he knows what he's doing, and I think that he's able to sort of find inspiration in doing things that are sort of unprofessional or whatever, unlearning how to be a proper musician, and that, but still being able to come up with something honest. I think that's really cool.
Yes, for sure. Honest is probably the best word for that project.
I mean, that's really, I think, what attracts me to most music in general is like energy and honesty more than anything,
Yeah. Okay. So, the next thing I wanted to bring up, I noticed that you're huge into like horror and Marvel comics.
Yeah.
I used to be big into Punisher back in the day, right?
Okay.
And, I want to ask you, like, what is your greatest find? And what have you been always searching for? Like, what is the gem in the I don't know, a needle in a haystack?
I mean, well, for me, I'm a big fan of Jack Kirby, who's sort of like the yin to Stan Lee's yang. Basically, any Marvel character, classic Marvel character, that isn't Spider-Man or Doctor Strange was co-created by Jack Kirby. You know, Thor, Fantastic Four, Captain America, Nick Fury, Daredevil, Iron Man, et cetera, et cetera. And anyway, so really anything that he has done, especially in the 60s and 70s, is something that I will buy. And that's kind of like when I go on tours, when I do most of my comic shopping, because it's just
sick.
It's just more fun to be like, oh, I'm in Cincinnati. Like, just all right, Google Maps. Like, where can I go buy some comics?
That's awesome. Now, does your band like buy comics on the road, or is it just you?
It's me and Ross. And actually, before Ross was in Exhumed, back when we were both in high school, I used to work at a comic store, and he was one of our customers. He went to a different high school with our original drummer, Cole. And that was sort of how we all became friends. First, it was like comics, sci-fi, tabletop role-playing. And then we kind of ushered him into like, oh, cool, you like Ministry and like Metallica or whatever, like check out Symphonies of Sickness, check out Horror of the Zombies. And so that was kind of like, we sort of lured him into the rock world.
Nice. That is cool. So you know, what have you been like searching for? You know, what is like the one issue that you just haven't been able to find?
I mean, the problem is actually, like, especially with the internet, is I can find almost anything I'm looking for. It's just being able to find it in my price range. And, you know, I got a lot of stuff back when I used to work at a comic store, like Avengers #1 or Avengers #4, where Captain America comes out of the ice, which is one of my, that's like if my house was on fire, you know, after making sure my wife and my dog were okay, that would be the one possession I'd grab. So I was able to find a lot of that stuff, but it's just about finding, you know, stuff at a reasonable price. I'm not looking for mint condition things. I like to just have like a reading copy. And you used to be able to find that stuff for, you know, like between like $10 to $40, and now it's more like between like 50 to 100 a lot of the time.
Right.
So I'm just looking to fill holes in my collection at reasonable prices, you know, and that's what I'm always looking for. I'm just looking for like something in the first 100 issues of Fantastic Four that I don't have that is under $60. Like, that's what I'm going for.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, when I was in Florida, I stopped at a comic shop, and some of them were like $400. Like,
dude.
And I mean, like, I'm like, shit, if I came across some of those old ones and $400 a piece, man, I could be rich.
Right? I mean, you know, the problem with the internet, though, it's the same thing with buying records, is everybody, you go into a mom and pop store and they're like, oh, look, here's this comic, and you bring it up, you know, or like an antique shop or whatever, and there's just some random comics. You're like, I would like to buy this. And then they look online and they're like, oh, that'll be $30. And it's like, man, fuck, before the internet, you just would have been like, give me $1 for it, you know?
Right. Everything. Some stores around here, like the House of Guitars, they don't even have price tags on anything. It's all off the internet.
The House of Guitars, like, I love that store and I had a great time going there, but I almost had like a panic attack. I'm like,
too claustrophobic for
you. It's just so disorganized, especially because I grew up, you know, before I was into music, I was a comic book guy. And like, one of the things comic book collectors do
you gotta
organize.
Jesus Christ. You probably walked in there and like your hair stood up.
Right. It was so chaotic. And I was like, how can you, like, because there's a lot of great stuff. I ended up spending like $75 in there. And there's so much good stuff, but I was just like, you know, stuff's getting damaged because it's not organized correctly. No one can find anything. And it's just, you know, I felt like being like, I'll fly out and I'll work here for a week for store credit.
And I'll just clean.
Right. I will just organize all these LPs. Give me $20 an hour store credit. And I'll organize all these fucking records. And by the end of the week, at least one quadrant of the store will be whipped into shape, because this is unacceptable.
I think the funniest thing about that is like they have like 7 employees like all the time. Like,
wow.
And it's still a mess after all these years.
The other thing that was nuts too is they had so many sick like original shirts from the 80s, like an original like Pleasure to Kill shirt that was like thumbtacked to the ceiling and the sun's been shining on it for 30 years. And I was like, dude, you're killing me, man. That's like
You're killing me, man.
What are you doing?
It's just like a poster up there.
Right. I mean, it's just like, I would never display like my records or my posters or my comics in a room that got direct sunlight on the walls. It's like, you're just asking to destroy your stuff. And I was just seeing this stuff. I was just like, oh my God, you guys, I love the innocence and the sincerity of it. But I was just like, wow. Great store. We had a great time there. I mean, I think we spent like 2 hours in that place and it was awesome. But yeah,
there we go.
The disorganization was, whew.
Yeah. That every time I walk in there, I'm like, I think the biggest thing is like the records on the ground. It's like, bro,
just on the ground.
If I step on one, like that ain't my fault. Like you got to clean the freaking walkways. Like,
yeah, it's wild, but I do recommend anybody that's near Rochester, like if you're into rock metal at all, like going in there is a must.
And mazes, but anyway, so I wanted to bring up Dark Realm Records. Okay. California,
yeah.
That's a kick-ass record store. That's what got me into the whole black metal, death metal thing. And I just want to ask, like, how many times have you been there?
I only went there a couple times. It was the guys from Citizen Intent. It was their store. And I think like half of what they got to kind of start the store, I think they ended up buying from like Richard from Wild Rags, which was sort of Wild Rags was like a staple through the 80s and early 90s. And now Wild Rags was the fucking shit. I mean, they had so much stuff. I spent a lot of money in there. I think by the time Dark Realm was open in the late 90s, like early 2000s, like I was already like working at Necropolis Records in Fremont, the now defunct black death metal label. And, Exhumed was putting out records. So I was just getting tons and tons of stuff around that time anyway. So it was like, I don't need to go to a fucking, because that was the era, the pre-internet era where everybody had a distro and everybody traded with everybody else. So it was like, oh, I got this new album. Like, cool. I'll send 20 to Relapse or Century Media or whatever, and they'll send me X of whatever. And so everybody kind of could just get, if you worked at a label, you could get anything like, snapping your fingers. And the thing I remember at Dark Realm is they had some really cool records like displayed, and I was like, oh, what's up with that? And they're like, oh, that's just like display. That's like my personal collection. And I was like, oh man, come on.
Damn. They did it to you.
Right? It's like, don't tease me like that, man.
Damn. Okay. All right. So here we go. We're just talking about comics and I missed this. Has an Exhumed comic book been ever like discussed? Or I know I read something that you are starting to write scripts.
I wrote a comic script for an artist named Kelly Williams, who's a pretty prolific indie comics guy. And he did a horror series, and we collaborated on a story together. I was developing a couple other scripts, but I've ended up just starting to write prose because it's just a little bit easier. I sold like my first story last year. It was in an anthology book called Horrorama. It's like almost a novella, maybe too long for a short story, maybe a novella. It's just easier because you don't have to wait around for an artist. You just write the whole thing yourself. And Ross has done a comic for Ghoul, who he works with a lot. And so we've definitely talked about it. I think it's just sort of more, if we were to do it, we talked about doing like a sort of EC style anthology where we sort of adapt like 3 or 4 different songs into short stories and illustrate them that way. And we've also talked about doing that for Gruesome. It's just something that has never quite come together. I guess I'm not totally sold on the concept, or I probably would have worked harder on it.
Right.
But I still think it would be cool, it's something that like comics are so near and dear to my heart that I guess I feel like if I'm not going to be 100% satisfied, and I'm probably going to be like way too picky about it, then it's hard for me to sort of want to do it.
That's my motto too, man. I was just saying that if I'm not going to do something 100%, there's no point in me doing it.
Right. I think
that's my motto.
I think probably the easiest way someone could get me to really work on it would be to come up with a bunch of stuff and then be like, cool. So like, here's an idea. Let's go forward with it. And I'd be like, whoa, hold on now. And then I would have the incentive to like get started on it and really like dig into it. But it is something we've talked about, and I think it would be cool. It's just something neat. I mean, people have a lot of Exhumed shirts, so we need to sort of branch out and offer them something different. And there has always been a strong like imagery and kind of narrative side to the band. So hopefully we can work on something that we'll believe in.
Yeah. Okay. So off of the question before that, spots in California, what are some cool hotspots that people don't really know about in the metal scene that I don't know, like if you go on Google and look up something about metal in California, like you're not going to find.
I know, well, here in San Luis Obispo, which is, I don't live in San Luis Obispo itself, but I live like 15 minutes away. But that's where our studio is. That's where I'm sitting right now. We have a great record store called Boo Boo Records, and their buyer, Frank, is also like the graphic designer for Unique Leader Records.
Oh, nice.
And so he's a serious metal guy. He's also a serious record store clerk. You can ask him about fucking, Dixieland jazz or like, atonal 20th century classical music, and he'll probably know that too. But he is like a real metal dude, and he has a very well-stocked metal section. And I know Ron Quintana, who used to do the old Metal Mania zine in the early 80s, the guy that came up with the name Metallica. He was going to call his fanzine Encyclopedia Metallica, and he asked Lars what he thought of it. And he's like, "That name sucks. Don't use that." So he called it Metal Mania instead. And anyway, the rest is history. But he has a record store in Grass Valley that I know stocks a lot of rock and metal, and the name escapes me off the top of my head. But I have to think that there's not that many record stores in Grass Valley, so you could probably find it if you're nearby Sacramento, and it would be very worthwhile. Not just to check out, to buy stuff, but I mean, if Ron is working, picking his brain, you could learn more about metal, one afternoon with that guy than you could in, 10 years on the internet. Those are kind of the first two that kind of mind. But I mean, like Amoeba, as much as that's like the known kind of record store, Amoeba in LA, I haven't been to the new location because that's been since the pandemic.
Moved?
Yeah, they had to move off of the strip, but apparently their new location is awesome. I just haven't had an occasion to go to Los Angeles because of the lockdown and everything else. It's just but they are back open, and all my friends down there have said that the new location is just as good, and that's really it's worth going. It's like a size of a supermarket,
right.
Practically.
Yeah, I went to that one on the strip once.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, I went to a few spots. I visited, I think it was Metallica's home, and then Van Halen's liquor store that they used to go to.
Oh yeah, in Pasadena. Yeah.
Yep, and then Amoeba.
Nice.
So those are the three spots I've been to.
So Metallica, was that in Downey, or was that in?
Yes, that sounds familiar.
Okay.
Yep. I got lucky. I got to go to the school that they went to.
Oh, cool.
It was like during the summer, and the whole school was closed, and I caught like janitor or something, and they let me in to go see the freaking guitar. It was so sweet.
Oh, that's very cool. I was in Hayward a while ago for summer. Actually, I used to live in Hayward, and I never went, but I was in Hayward randomly a couple of years ago, and my wife and I went to the Cliff Burton's old, I think it's his elementary school, where they have a little like plaque for him and stuff, which was pretty cool.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he's a Hayward, Castro Valley guy.
Dang. I didn't see that on the freaking Google Maps.
Well, that's a lot further away. That's in the Bay Area, because James is from L.A. Lars obviously was born in Denmark, but his family moved to Los Angeles or the greater L.A. area, whatever. And then they all moved up to the Bay Area to get Cliff, and Cliff Cliff was from Hayward, and they all moved to El Cerrito. And Kirk, I think Kirk's from, I don't know where he's from. He's from somewhere in the Bay Area. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I have no idea, but I will say I was watching a Metallica documentary yesterday, so I should have known. I don't know.
I mean, it's, everyone just says like San Francisco, like that's the whole Bay Area. But I mean, I grew up there, so it's obviously much more specific for me because the names of these towns, I'm like, oh, I know where that is. Like, Possessed is from Pinole. Exodus is from Oakland, Richmond, Berkeley, like, whereas to people that aren't from California, they're just like San Francisco. Maybe they know, if they're into sports, maybe they know San Jose or Oakland, and that's really about it. So.
Gotcha. So, the last thing I wanted to mention is I noticed that you got featured in the Soul Grinder zine.
Right.
Which was awesome. I just came in the mail. I did a trade with them. I just started up a zine myself, and I'm just kind of curious on your thoughts on zines. In this day and age, 2021, do you think zines should be relevant? The whole purpose of a zine back in the day is totally different from now. Like, what do you think on that?
Well, I think that there's sort of two sides to it. On one hand, in the 80s and 90s, magazines were a source of information. And that was, whether it was like Hit Parade or Circus, or whether it was, Chain Letter or Lesson Pathology or Comatose or Atmosphere or any of the ones I used to read in the early 90s. And, that was the way you got information, because you didn't go on the internet, or you talked to people and whatever. So as a source of information, zines are obviously less efficient than the internet. But I mean, for me, as someone who, both is a writer and is a reader, I really prefer reading something I can hold in my hand. I don't like using a Kindle or an iPad. I can read comics like on a phone or an iPad. That's fine, because it's pictures. But in terms of reading just text, like, I find it straining to read anything of length on a screen. Like, I can read like one magazine article and done, whereas like, I still get Decibel every month, and it's like, depending on, what my pooping habits are like, I'll usually read the whole magazine front to back, because it's just pleasurable to read a magazine. So I think zines can deliver information in more depth than the internet can, which maybe isn't as useful for reviews. But if, like Snake Pit is a great magazine, and if there's a zine that's like, hey, we've got like a fucking 6-page interview with some dude that not that many people interview, I mean, that's really worthwhile. And the other purpose that zines serve is that they're, a piece of, I guess, memorabilia that sort of captures that moment in time in a way that, like, cool, I read a review on this album on whatever Toilet of Hell or whatever website, and then I went out and bought it, and that's great. But, it's sort of, I like, I'm old, dude. I like things. So to me, it's like there's a connection between the magazine and then the record and then the experience with that record. And that's sort of like a whole symbiotic existence where you can't really separate them completely. Whereas now, reading something on your phone really quick and be like, oh, I heard the new blah, blah, blah is fucking brutal. I'm going to like check it out and download it.
Right.
It's not quite as personal. Of course, the upside is that you can fucking listen to almost anything all the time for much cheaper than you could back in the day. So I'm not trying to be one of those guys like, oh, it's better.
No, you're good.
I'm not into that get off my lawn shit. I just think it's a trade-off. And having a physical kind of relic that goes along with your experience with music in that time is something that's valuable to me as a fan. To younger people that maybe didn't grow up with it, it could be a novelty or it could seem sort of superfluous. But
yeah, like a homage kind of,
right,
in a way.
And I mean, it's the whole media access is so different now than it was 30 years ago. And in most ways, I think it's really great. But in other ways, you miss stuff, like you miss zines. And I think when I see people do them, I think it's really cool,
Yeah, right on. Well, sweet. I'm going to try to get you in the next one, maybe, if you want to do it. And the last thing I want to say is, what do you got to promote? Gruesome? Yeah. I mean, what do you got? What do you got brewing? What can people buy from you?
Well, we have a web store, which is exhumed.bigcartel.com. And there you can get Exhumed stuff. You can get stuff from my heavy metal band Pounder. We have a couple gruesome items, stuff from my old thrash band Decapitator. And so we have, records, apparel, random patches, random stuff. You can get the book with my story in it there as well. You can also, I have my own website, MattHarveyMustBeDestroyed.com, where I have my blog and whatever news about shit I'm up to. The next kind of actionable things that are going on is Gruesome is going to be playing in Florida in July, which I'm excited about. I haven't played a show in like a year and a half, and it's fucking weird.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a lot of fun. Aside from the fact that being in Florida in July fucking sucks. Just, to exist in that humidity sucks. But other than that, it's going to fucking rule. I also have a solo album that's going to be released digitally by Relapse here, like I think within the next month. And it's got nothing to do with metal. It's just it's more like a soundtrack kind of record. So if you're into film music, that might be interesting. And it's a digital thing, so you can just stream it and be like, what the fuck is this guy doing? Or, maybe you'll like it, maybe not. So I'm excited about that. And then, moving into the future, we're very close to finishing the new Exhumed record. There's just a few leads and vocals to put down, and then that will be out probably early next year. And then I'll be moving into working full bore on the new Gruesome. And I have another EP with another band that's going to be announced soon. That will be coming out this fall, but I'm not supposed to say anything until the announcement's made. So that's as much as I can say.
Goddamn, dude, you're busy.
Hey, man, I'm not getting any younger, and it's like I had the chance to do a lot of cool shit. So, I mean, what the fuck would I be doing just sitting around not doing it? There's people that dream about getting to do the stuff that I'm able to do, and I try not to take it for granted.